So to factor a polynomial, we basically are going to do the same thing that we do for a monomial. Our factor squares are going to be the one that we need to use. Like our factor squares are going to be the helpful part. Okay? So to factor a polynomial, for example, if I had the polynomial 3x to the third plus 12x squared minus 9x. Right? So that's a polynomial. It's a math problem. It's got addition and subtraction inside of it. But really, I mean, it's the same thing as if they were just independent of each other, right? If it was just 3x to the third and 12x squared and negative 9x. I mean, right? We just have our terms, our monomials all put together into a math problem. So to solve this problem, you think of each term as a monomial. So this is a trinomial, so we think of it as just three separate things, right? We look at them independently. So then we find the GCF of all terms. So in this problem, we'd find the GCF of all three terms. If it was a binomial, we'd find the GCF of both terms. The GCF gets undistributed. The GCF gets undistributed, right? So if you think about distributive property, it's when there's a number in front and it multiplies it. So what's undistributing? Right. Meaning we're going to divide. Instead of multiply, we're going to divide, right? The GCF will go in front of the parentheses. Right, we're dividing. Instead of multiplying, we're dividing. The GCF is going in front. The leftover stays inside. And you look at that and it may be a little wonky. The directions may not make sense because we haven't practiced it yet. But once we practice, I think you'll figure it out. Like it makes sense. All right, so we're going to do this the long way. And we're going to do this the easy way. Okay? Are you ready? Let's do it the easy way first. Sound good? So here's an example. Let's do 3x to the third plus 12x squared minus 9x. And as always, I'm going to show way too much work because these are our notes, correct? Okay. The GCF of 3x to the third, 12x squared, and negative 9x. 3, 12, and 9. What's their greatest common factor? 3. Right? What else do they all share? Anything? They share 3 and they share 1x. So if you can identify, we're good to go. So 3x goes in front, and what's left over stays inside. So what's 3x to the third divided by 3x? What's 3 divided by 3? 1. And what's x to the third divided by x?
X squared.
What's 12 divided by 3?
4.
Positive 4. What's x squared divided by x? X. What's negative 9 divided by 3?
3.
Negative 3. And what's x divided by x?
Nothing.
Cancels out. And there's your answer. We undistributed. Easy, right? I mean, let's do a couple more of the easy ones.
Like that means there's harder ones.
Well, I mean, if there's just bigger numbers. Let's do negative 4x squared minus 6x. So we're looking for the GCF, the greatest common factor, of negative 4 x squared minus 6x. What do they both share? What's the greatest common factor? What do they share? What factors do they share, Dylan M? 2. Anything else that they share?
Yeah, it would be 2 and negative.
They also share an x. Now here's the interesting part. I understand that greatest common factor means biggest, right? The biggest number that they share. But there's a disclaimer with this. You have to check. Even though greatest common factor stands for biggest common factor, greatest, if they all share a negative, factor it out too. And that's kind of the flaw in the system, because 2x is greater than negative 2x, correct? But they both share that negative, so we're going to take that negative out also. It doesn't happen very often that everything shares a negative. So if they all share a negative, that gets factored out too. And that's kind of the tricky part of this concept, greatest common factor, because a negative value is not greater than a positive value. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so the greatest common factor goes in front, negative 2x. And what's left over stays inside. So what's negative 4 divided by negative 2? Negative 4 divided by negative 2.
Negative 2. 2.
2. What's x squared divided by x? What's negative 6 divided by negative 2?
3.
Positive 3. X divided by x is nothing. And there's your answer. We undistributed it. We factored it. Let's try another one. 36f plus 18f squared plus 3. 36f plus 18f squared plus 3. Look at your factor squares. What do 36f, 18f squared, and positive 3, what do they all share? What can they all be divided by, Eli? 3. So the greatest common factor is 3. Should have changed colors on you, sorry. So I'm going to take that 3 and I'm going to put it at the beginning. We'll get there. 36f divided by 3. What's 36 divided by 3?
12.
And look, you guys. Where's 36? Remember, I've set it up for you. 36 divided by 3, what's its partner? 12. It tells you right there on your factor squares. 12 what? 36f divided by 3. 12f. What's 18f squared divided by 3? Positive 6f squared. And what's 3 divided by 3?
1.
Zach made a good point. Zach, what's wrong with this?
It's not in standard form.
It's not in standard form. Let's fix it. 3 6f squared plus 12f plus 1. And we're done. All right, let's try a hard one. Binomial, correct?
Yes.
So we're going to undistribute. But 230 is not on my factor squares. So I'm going to have to factor tree it. So negative 230 x to the 4th. When there's a negative, take that negative out first and circle it. Take out the negative 1. So now I'm just working with 230. I've taken the negative, I've removed the negative. So now I have 230. All right, what times what? It ends in a 0.
10 times 20.
10 times 23. Tell me about 10. 5 and 2. Tell me about 5. It's a prime. Tell me about 2. It's also a prime. Tell me about 23. And it's a prime. Wasn't terrible. Tell me about x to the 4th. Can you break it up? I mean, into x and x to the 3rd And then break up x to the third into x and x squared, and then break up x squared into x and x. Or what could you do to x to the fourth? What is x to the fourth? X, 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 and x, right? I mean, it's just 4 of them. Bless you. 96x to the third. Tell me about 96. It's on your chart. You can tell me. 2 and 48. Tell me about 48. 24 and 2. And now 2 is prime. Tell me about 24. What about 6 and 4? Does that work too? 8 and 3 works. 6 and 4 works. Tell me about 8. Tell me about 4. What about x to the third? X, 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 right? Find our greatest common factor. What's left, or what do they share? They share a 2. They share anything else? Any other coefficients? No. They share 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So what's the greatest common factor? 2x cubed is the greatest common factor. They share a 2 and they share x cubed. Here's the deal. Now you just divide again. What's negative 230 divided by 2? Or 23 times 5 times negative 1. Whatever circled factors aren't shared, it's the same thing. So what's negative 230 divided by 2? Negative 115. And x to the fourth divided by x to the third is x. Look, there's 1 left over. I mean, I'm there. What's 96 divided by 2? Positive 48. And how many x's are left over? None, because x to the third divided by x to the third is 1, right? There's your answer. We undistributed. We factored it. To factor, think of each term as a monomial. Look at each one separately. 3x to the third, 12x squared, and negative 9x. Find the GCF of all terms. That GCF goes in front. We're undistributing, so we divide across. The leftover, whatever you divide and get an right, your answer to your division is what stays inside.